Well, happy Trinity Sunday. I know that you got up for church this morning and were thinking, let's talk about the mystery of the Trinity, maybe in a lecture form where Sanford can pontificate ad nauseum to you about what the Trinity is and how to avoid heresy in the midst of it. Well, don't worry. We're going to just have just a tiny little lecture at the beginning, and then we'll transition and we'll do a little something at the end that's a little more fun. So, to begin with, the Trinity, as you know, is God, as we are able to best articulate God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We say it's three persons as one God, not three gods. We're monotheistic. And the three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, kind of the most important thing to remember for this morning is going to be that they are in relationship with each other. The Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are all in this very important, very tight relationship with one another. And while each member of each person of the Trinity is distinct in some way, they're connected through love. They love one another. And that is really, really important to remember as we kind of get into a little more about the Trinity. So before anything happened, before the creation, God exists as three persons in one being connected by love. Okay? We're good so far, right? That's pretty easy. Yeah. Here's the thing about our readings today. The gospel is tough, so we're just going to leave that one alone. We could talk about Romans, but we're not going to talk about Romans because that would bring out the really Lutheran part of me, so I'm just going to leave Romans alone. We're going to talk about the proverb, Proverbs 8. For those of you who have read some of the Proverbs, it's kind of common sense wisdom. Proverbs give us pieces of advice that help us to live our lives. Now in Proverbs 8, though, we see something a little bit different. We hear of this character. Her name is Wisdom. So the writer personifies wisdom as a female character. And the name that has kind of come up over the years is Sophia. So Sophia is wisdom personified in Proverbs. And what happens is you see at the beginning of the reading that Sophia, wisdom, is on the street corner. She's at the crossroads and she's crying out. She's crying out to everyone who will listen, all of her kind of wise words, I suppose. She wants people to listen to her. And then as the reading goes along, we learn something very, very interesting about this character. She declares that she has been with God since the very beginning, that she was there at the creation of the world, of the animals, of the humans. She was there before there was water. She was there at the very beginning. And in fact, it goes so far in Proverbs to say, and this is the crucial little piece that's going to connect us with the Trinity, it says, she says that she was created as God's first act. Now, what is wisdom? What is this? Is it just kind of advice or moral ways of being, little kind of common sense bits of knowledge? Well, actually, we would argue that wisdom is a deep and abiding order. Wisdom is an abiding order. It is the order of things. So we could, we talked a little bit about science. We could kind of delve into some science stuff with that, but I'm going to leave that for Wednesday. Thank you, Joe. And I'm going to kind of leave that idea that wisdom is the abiding order. And wisdom was there when God created. So as God created according to this order, this wisdom throughout the creation. And there's one little piece that I absolutely love. It's kind of a line that you probably may have missed. But it says that wisdom was there when God restrained the waters. When God commanded that the waters not exceed what God wanted the waters to do. And this idea of boundarying the waters, it doesn't make a lot of sense on Earth, but if you go up into space, right, if you go on a spaceship and you open a Diet Coke, you're going to end up with a whole mess, right? It's going to go out everywhere because the waters are not boundaried. And so when we think about the way that the waters are boundaried on Earth, we of course think of gravity. And so that's part of how wisdom abided with God in the very beginning. Now, I mentioned that this connects with the Trinity. There's a problem. And the problem comes around 300 AD, before the Council of Nicaea created being, right? And then he reads John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now we all know that the Word in John 1 is chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now we all know that the Word in John 1 is, thank you, the answer that is always right in Sunday school, Jesus, right? And so Arius basically confuses the two, and he says, well, if Jesus was in the beginning with the Word, and wisdom is the first being kind of created at the beginning, well, they must be the same. And so Arius kind of puts his flag in the mud there, and that becomes his thing. And this creates a huge, bigger controversy than we've had in our modern day. It becomes this huge controversy, which we have to have two councils in 325 and 381, the councils of Nicaea. This is where we get our Nicene Creed. And of course, you all know that Arius is wrong. The Arian controversy becomes part of that which is outside of the official teaching of the church. So anytime we have I always like to mention this, back in the day, a heresy was a big deal. It's not as big a deal anymore, but heresies are those teachings that are outside of the boundary of the church. And to think that Jesus was created is not official church teaching. If you believe that's fine, kind of. We should talk. But in the Nicene Creed, we learn that Jesus is not created. Jesus is eternally begotten. Right, I know it's on the tip of your tongue. Begotten. You're like, yes, of course, Jesus is eternally begotten. And begetting is very different than creating. Begetting is different than creating. Whole nother sermon. We don't have time for that today. So Jesus remains the second person of the Trinity, eternally begotten of the Father, with God for all eternity. Sophia, wisdom, is the first creation, the order, the divine order of things that is brought about at the very beginning, even before anything is made. And so what's interesting about that to me is that the Trinity exists in relationship with one another, and now Sophia, this extra kind of piece, this order of thing, abides with God in the creation, even to this day. So if you're lost at this point, you're like, gosh, I thought I wasn't getting a lecture. He totally lied to me at the beginning of the sermon. Let's just awkwardly transition and talk about something else that might connect at the end. As Jim mentioned, I was at my sister's wedding. Beautiful. Whole nother sermon. Have to process it a little more, but everything went great. Pop-Up was there. You all know Pop-Up. Pop-Up is my 94-year-old grandfather, still alive and kicking. He'll be 95 in November. Married to his third wife, Virginia, my fifth grandmother out of 6. I told you all about Pop-Up's wedding a number of years ago. I'm sure you remember every word that I say, which is so nice of you. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about Pop-Up because we were reminiscing at the wedding about this time when I was 13, maybe 12 or 13 years old. And Pop-Up is old school. I mean, he's a very lovely, wonderful guy, but he's old school. He thinks that it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, he made my mother do something similar. You need to learn how to hunt, was his kind of thing. And you all know me well enough that I'm not a hunter, but he decided when I was 12 or 13 that I was going to learn how to hunt, which started with a gun safety class over a weekend that he went with me to. I'm the oldest grandchild, by the way, so I don't think my brother or my sister had to go through this experience, but I went to the gun safety class, and a couple of months later, we went skeet shooting. Of course, skeet, those little clay, they call them pigeons, they're just clay discs. I didn't hit one of them, and I think Pop-Up started to realize the error of his ways when yeah, anyway, a couple months later, we decided to go hunting. Now, we had a dog at this point, and I've talked about this dog before, our family dog, Dripper. Dripper, of course, we got as an adult. He was already fully trained, and he was a German short-haired pointer. Now, if you know anything about dogs and hunting dogs, German short-haired pointers do as their name implies. They point. So they look at squirrels and birds, and they kind of lift one leg. If you've never seen it, you guys can Google it. Yeah. So Pop-Up was really excited about having, by the way, Dripper's name comes from the dripping that happens after he drinks water, which also it turns out is something that almost all dogs do. So I thought it was a really original name back in the day, but it's not. So we go out, wake up really early, we take we're going to do a pheasant hunt. And if you're from, this is in Pennsylvania, what you do with a pheasant hunt is the dog finds the birds, and then the dog will go flush the birds out of the field. The birds fly up in the air, you shoot the bird, and then I'm not sure what happens afterwards, because we didn't end up killing anything that day, which, thank God. So Dripper, of course, does his pointing. He was a very good dog. Good boy, Pop-Up kept saying, good boy. So then we sent the dog out, and the dog went, so the birds came up, Pop-Up shot the gun. I didn't shoot the gun because he knew that would just be a waste of ammo. And as the gun went off, something strange happened. Dripper, running toward the birds, heard the gunshot and immediately turned around and started running as far and as fast away from the birds as he could. And I was right there with him. Couldn't do it. So we were driving home that day, and it was this kind of, we didn't kill anything, and that was good because I would have had to eat it, and that would have been very challenging, even though I like meat. But Pop-Up and I were driving home, and he said, "So Sanford, what do you think about hunting?" Now that he had kind of catechized me in the ways of, becoming an adult or a man or whatever he wanted to do. And I said, Pop-Up, I really enjoyed my time with you, but I think I'm good. I don't need to become a hunter. And he said, well, that's good. That's okay. I'm just proud of you for being mature enough to come with me on this hunt. And it made me think, and this is kind of what we talked about just briefly at the wedding, it made me think about kind of the order of things for Pop-Up. The order of things for Pop-Up is that this is part of being a responsible adult, is being able to know how to, handle a gun safely, how to, go and go with other adults into kind of a situation that might be a little scary, but to do it in a mature and responsible way. And for Pop-Up, this had to do with nature as well. Now, if you're like a vegetarian or a vegan, you're like, shooting birds is not like loving nature, right? That might be where you are, and that's fine. But for Pop-Up, hunting and fishing and crabbing and all of those outdoors events are part of how he communes with nature and how he believes we are to be good stewards of what we've been given. And that is something that he wanted to communicate to me. But the interesting part about how Pop-Up chose to do that was not by giving me a lecture. It wasn't by sitting me down and kind of talking at me. It was by abiding with me, by kind of deepening that relationship with me over the course of those number of months to learn how to do something that ended up not really working out in my mind, but in his mind, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It communicated that order that he believes is important to communicate to that next generation. And he did it through relationship, through abiding. And that's, I think, not quite exactly, but in a certain kind of parallel way, that's exactly what wisdom does with the relationship of the Trinity. The order of things comes about in the relationship that God has with creation and the relationship that God has with each of us and that we have with each other. And so may we continue to deepen that relationship, continue to abide with one another as we kind of soak in the Sophia, that order of things, as God has been doing since the very, very beginning. Amen.